Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. So let's hop in here. I'm in a weird position. I recorded an episode, maybe even two, of Killer 7, which I'm still playing this morning, and man, there's just some tiredness, I think, in my fingers. At this point, I don't even think I can really call it. The mouse seeming to be wrong, although maybe it is my mouse. Is just maybe the batteries are low, or maybe it's just worn out completely. But like I have it at the highest speed, and still I really would like to just move my wrist a little bit to get from one screen to the other, and even at the highest speed it's really not doing that. So I think more than likely I probably need to stop buying the exact same model of mouse and get some kind of like high input gaming mouse possibility, because I am just, my wrist is just getting more and more exhausted. Maybe that's because I just have a terrible setup here where I can't rest my wrist and my elbow in the right place. I don't know, but suffice it to say, I feel a little lethargic moving the mouse around already. Looks like there's going to be a new Duel Cup. There's a new selection pack, which we could potentially check out. And then there's a new structured deck. Unfortunately, I don't think Immortal Glory as a structured deck is going to really be playable in the top tier meta decks. So yeah, for the accountability section, like I said before, I hate that phrase, I'm playing Killer 7. Killer 7 is interesting in that it, so we have 9 hours until this goes away and 33 hours until this goes away. It warned you at the beginning for the violence in Killer 7, which, like most mature rated games, there is a lot of violence. But Suda 51, or Grasshopper Manufacturer, really paid no mind to the fact that there's a whole subplot that gets shown here where there's this drooling, disabled elderly man who is being abused by his caretaker, at least in one perception of reality. My general assumption is that the perception of reality that you're mostly in the game is a fantasy, and in that case his caretaker is like a Japanese maid who's just like always says yes master and is always prim and proper and following orders without a single complaint. But I suspect the real reality, you're supposed to assume, is that this elderly disabled man in a wheelchair is just being abused by this brat college girl who at one point like shoves a bowl of food in his face. At another point she slaps him, and she slapped him 2 or 3 times. And then out of the blue, kind of in the middle of the game, they start to throw in the sex without any warning, and like she's like humping him or straight up having sex with him, just almost certainly without his consent, because he's just a drooling, like can't respond at all, disabled old man. But they don't warn you about that, so that comes off as a bit of a shock, I would say. I definitely have, over the course of my life, gone from having art and media having no trigger warnings, for lack of a better term, or no warnings or content warnings at all, or very little content warnings. Movies throughout my lifetime did have like G, PG, and R uh, originally, but TV had no warnings at all for many decades after that. PG-13 came about probably when I was pretty young with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And like video games, I guess, didn't have ESRB ratings for a while. I guess somewhere around maybe the GameCube era, Nintendo 64 era ratings came in. Probably Nintendo 64. I'm fairly certain that NES games didn't have ratings and Super NES games didn't have the ESRB rating them. And certainly the expansion there of forms of art that have content warnings and what is warned has gotten deeper and deeper to the point where we have maybe gone a little too far in the content warnings. But yeah, that is an interesting contrast to look at a game like Killer 7, which was a game that probably came out around PlayStation 2 era, maybe PlayStation 3. And Suda51 just doesn't have any need to say, oh yeah, we're going to have elder abuse and that we don't need to really trigger a warning and spoil that surprise when it happens in the middle of the game. And we're going to have the caretaker straight up humping the guy and have implied sexual intercourse. And we're not going to warn people about that. Honestly, the warnings, content warnings, have gotten so crazy that when you see a game that says like alcohol use in it, you never know if that's a single character drinking a single light beer at the end credits, or if it is just straight up a Duke Nukem style gameplay mechanic where you're drinking beer all the time to refill your health, which there's a difference there, and you'd almost need a percentage of focus, or at the very least have light focus, some a lot, moderate, some drinking, moderate drinking, a lot drinking makes a lot of sense. Some violence, moderate amounts of violence for a video game, a lot of violence for a video game. Like that, you kind of need that extra descriptor, and more information is good, certainly, although it ruins the covers of video games with those warnings. But yeah, there really is no need or desire to have parents uninformed. Really, when you know parents don't look at the reviews, at the content warnings anyway, so you might as well let the small selection of good parents that are going to care about what their kids are playing be informed. Of course, in the case of Killer 7 is obviously an adult game that no kid should be playing. And I don't know if I really have much else to say about Killer 7. It's still going forward. I'm shocked that I'm still progressing through it. I've gotten to the 4th level, and by the 4th level you are having to lean more into swapping between the different personalities, which means that focusing in on upgrading a single character, in my case Kaede, probably isn't going to solve all of the struggle that you might have in a game like that. There are definitely some enemies that can only be destroyed by heavy attackers like Masked Day Smith, and then there are definitely some enemies that need precision zoomed in shots that Kaede can do, and then there's a collection of characters in between, some of which have special abilities to get to special areas, so there's just no getting around using pretty much all the characters at least a little bit. The story is crazy, to say the least, and I do think seeing how No More Heroes was, No More Heroes 1, compared to Killer 7, it makes some sense why No More Heroes is more of a kind of surface level story with a very consistent gameplay mechanic, with not that many mini games or puzzles, because Killer 7 basically has a lot of mini games and puzzles and not as many encounters with enemies as you would think. It throws stronger enemies at you instead of throwing more enemies at you, and it makes for a very weird experience for a game that feels like it should be something closer to House of the Dead, where you would just have a machine gun shooting bullets over and over again. Let's just see if this works. Let's see if we can stop this guy now. He's trying very hard to special summon things. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've been doing. In fact, I honestly couldn't really even tell you what I did on Tuesday. I think I fell asleep maybe 2 or 3 times and slept enough of the day away. I probably was playing Killer 7 all Tuesday, but like when I woke up this morning, I really had to look at my calendar on my phone and say, oh, today is Wednesday, because I thought today was potentially Tuesday. I also kind of thought maybe today was potentially Thursday. And this Thursday is, in the evening, going to be the Game Awards, not the Steam Game Awards, just the Game Awards. That with that, if I watch that on Steam.tv, I might have a chance at actually winning a Steam Deck, and I would enjoy winning a Steam Deck, certainly, as much as the next person. And so I'm gonna, both for just news input reasons and for stupid maybe I'll win something reasons, even though the odds are ridiculously low, take some time out on Thursday to watch that. Inherently, I still am playing Destiny Child. I'm still playing the Goblin mining game, which is really going nowhere, and the extra gems that potentially would let you continue to have momentum, or a good amount of momentum in the Goblin mining games, have dried up. That after the first 15-20 days of playing, you're gonna get all the achievement type rewards that give you gems, and you won't get any more than likely, without buying gems. And so really I should just abandon the Goblin mining game, since it's not really going anywhere. And I'm still playing Marvel Snap, and even though I initially said I didn't like Marvel Snap, and still really don't like Marvel Snap, I seem to still be trapped into playing that. Although, of all the dumb things I've been like trapped into doing just because of my own obsessions and OCD, I would take playing Marvel Snap over listening to like the Giant Bombcast at this point any day of the week, which I have managed to stay away from that. And I'm also watching Netflix, so that's taking up time. Watching Big Mouth. That first season of Big Mouth, I think, is kind of rough. And once you get past that first season, you start to have more of a narrative of the characters going through a lot of events in their life instead of just going through puberty, where it feels like the first season was just, oh, these kids are going through puberty, that's the joke and the only joke. throughout the entire first season. And that's a little too much. I also arguably would say I would prefer if they did either a live action but probably animated show where just the characters are grown up adults. Yeah, I think that would probably be better if they were depicted as grown-up adults, even though the actual characters are young kids. It would be fairly easy at the beginning credits to just show them as kids animated and then show them go through like a Sailor Moon type transformation where they just grow bigger, or maybe Sailor Moon's the wrong type of transformation there, but just a transformation where in their minds they see themselves as adults. Because that would even make like a good commentary on how most kids see themselves anyways. But yeah, there were entire episodes in later seasons of Big Mouth, which I think I'm somewhere in season 3 now, where they're doing just like Twilight Zone parodies and Seinfeld parodies, and it's much more about the comedy. Yeah, and I would definitely say you may spoil a little bit by watching Human Resources first, like I did instead of Big Mouth, but I think you actually get a better experience by watching Human Resources, because you're seeing that, what I assume is the same writing team, at their peak. And then you're going back and seeing how they got there without really being too spoiled. It would be almost like if there was a Seinfeld spin-off and you were seeing Larry David at his peak with his comedy, and then you went and watched Seinfeld, which I guess you could do that. You could probably watch some of the good sections of Curb Your Enthusiasm and then go watch Seinfeld. Although in that case I don't think I'd recommend that. Let's see if I've been doing anything else. Not really. I have been noticing that, particularly on slickdeals.net, there have been some sales for like small Lego sets and just sales for things in general. I'm starting to see a little bit more desperation from companies really trying to clear out their inventory more than I feel like I've ever seen before in this year, which that almost certainly is because of the recession and just people not actually spending as much money as they would like, or spending as much money. Oh, we've got a problem with this deck. So Flowrander has now just been made illegal because of this card. So we got to get rid of that. And then we'll just add one of those, which is probably not the best move. We probably should add one of those, but we don't have that, and I don't really want to craft that. Well, actually, it would be fairly easy to craft that. Alright, we'll stick with that. Let's see. Batch generate cards not owned for 30 crafting points. And then save. is making that one card in Floander's deck all of a sudden going to make Floander not viable? Probably not. But maybe, who knows? At a certain level, there is a question about how viable my specific Floander deck ever was. It's definitely a slower deck. But the meta definitely could have shifted. I heard of a website called ProtonDB that takes the compatibility layers of Proton that is in the Steam Deck, and you can sign in with your Steam account, which maybe isn't safe, but I did it anyways. And then it compared my Steam library to what was in their database. Now, it's a little deceptive in that it's basically comparing everything that matches in its database. So you are getting results of games that it says are completely borked, they won't launch or run at all, and you're getting results that say they're completely incompatible and won't run. And you will also be getting results that say this mostly runs or this partially runs, none of which would really be acceptable. And it didn't seem like there really was a filter for that. So it came up with like 1,500 results, and of the results, there's a decent number of games there, certainly. Way more than, say, the 3 or 4 games I played on my Nintendo Switch. And stupidly, I bought myself a couple more games this Christmas from Nintendo Switch, which I'm hoping just motivates me to get back to it. Yeah, I've seen also the little figurines for like Metroid Dread on sale too, so the amiibos I suspect will possibly go away. Well, like, yeah, if I was a video game storefront, I probably would be of the opinion that it's time to start to clear out on amiibos. There's probably enough saturation in the market of that, and at any point Nintendo could get rid of the content being locked behind amiibos, which that was always a dumb idea. But yeah, I've just generally seen a lot of things that are on sale, which that probably sucks for most people because you've already got your Prime Day sale, you've already got a Black Friday sale, you've already got so many sales that you've probably spent money on. Just because something is discounted doesn't mean you can inherently afford it or shouldn't inherently try to afford it. And that's in particular why I didn't buy the amiibos, even though they might benefit me some. But yeah, there was a like adjustable bed frames, electric bed frames, that were on sale, and those practically never go on sale because it's such a just like niche and unique item. Let's see. See if we can do this. Yeah, that didn't help me. Okay. Well, these are all in attack position, so let's just see if we can take these guys out. I don't think we need to activate that effect. Kind of wish I had more to talk about as far as video games, and I guess we're fairly slow at the point that there won't be that much news. We do have news to talk about, of course, but as my focus is more and more around oversleeping and insomnia and doing things like watching Netflix, I'm not getting into the nitty-gritty of potential video game news, if there was even any potential video game news extra. We probably should try to start somewhat earlier today and go through the video game news. I also should probably take out some of these YouTube shorts and make some YouTube shorts, make some more room. Killer 7 did crash after a few hours of being left paused, which is not really a big deal. And there is this SFC//scan now command that will scan for DLL problems, which it said there was an ntdll.dll file that caused the crash, which, I mean, OBS could be causing that problem, a memory leak could be causing that problem. Basically anything could be causing that problem, and there's not really a way to know. Nor is it a big enough issue. I am slightly concerned that we maybe are getting back to some weird AMD CPU or bad RAM issue, but I don't really believe that's what's happening. I definitely hope that's not what's happening. And yeah, it's a little too early to raise the alarm. I'm also still peeved on myself as far as just my total and complete lack of progress I've made as far as getting my backup server up and running and set up well. Some of this definitely could be excused as me just waiting for ZFS to get better, but a lot of it is just straight up a project that I've been trying to build or work with for probably over 10 years, off and on, and the off has been just way too high compared to the on. And at a certain point there might just be an argument to figuring out something to do with it and calling it good enough. The main thing I'd like to do with it is have all my videos backed up in case YouTube just decides to straight up delete all of my content. On that aspect, I am also a little concerned about doing the like, share, subscribe video at the very beginning of each recording, because that means I'm not really making a pure unedited version of the video, but at a certain point it doesn't matter, and it would just be a waste of space Yeah, I'm just gonna win. I played way too much there for what was just probably going to be a victory. Yeah, it would be a huge waste of space to have a completely uncut version of the video and a final version of the video, but that would be the right move, certainly, to do it. Here. Let's see what happens when we flip this guy face down in defense position. Nothing. There we go. And see if this guy had some kind of redirect damage daily quest that he was trying to do. I just didn't let him accomplish that quest, even though it really wouldn't have affected me. Particularly in live streams, there really is no such thing as unedited video, because as soon as I come over here, the video in live presentation is being edited. So let's start going through the video game news. Striking Distance says that Callisto Protocol patches are coming. We already talked about this. Star Wars Jedi Survivor will be released on March 23rd according to Steam. We already talked about this. I really need to look at the programming, particularly for Video Games Chronicle, because we're getting a lot of repeats, particularly when there's a bookmarked article. Cyberpunk 2077 Game of the Year edition is planned for release in 2023. It will include the game's upcoming Phantom Liberty expansion. The only real problem with there being a Game of the Year edition around Cyberpunk 2077 is the ideological problem of Cyberpunk 2077 not being named Game of the Year by any reputable source whatsoever. It was a complete and total buggy mess, and nobody in their right mind would have possibly named Cyberpunk Game of the Year for the year it came out, which I guess was 2021. Now, it's an insult to the other games that came out in the same year that Cyberpunk came out for them to claim to be a Game of the Year edition. That being said, it is fairly obvious that that has just become the name nomenclature, the name that you call a game that is just a DLC collection edition, and that they don't even want to mention the word DLC, even though it totally is only because of DLC that game of the Year concept would even exist. Let's go ahead and get this, and this, and this, and this. Because there would be no need to re-release a game or try and sell a game a second time if it weren't for the DLC extras that are being sold on top of it. In the long run, it is definitely a step forward for me to potentially buy Cyberpunk 2077, but I still wouldn't likely actually consider buying Cyberpunk 2077, even if there was a on sale Game of the Year edition version of the game that was really cheap. Okay. Well, that didn't work. Let's see. Microsoft has announced that Xbox Series X and S games will increase in price to $70 starting in 2023. This will include games like Forza Motorsports, Redfall, and Starfield, which I think this is really dumb for Microsoft to announce, as they're still trying to get the Activision Blizzard acquisition through, because they've shown their hand too early and now given a reason to say, oh, well, they're already raising prices on companies that they have already purchased. Forza Motorsport, Redfall, Starfield. Starfield is Bethesda. Redfall, I couldn't tell you what that whose company is that. And Forza, I couldn't tell you which company that was either, but I do know Microsoft owns, I think, at least 2 out of the 3 of those parent companies that make those games. It would perhaps make a little bit more sense if Microsoft was saying the opposite and saying that our first party titles are staying $60 in 2023, or going to be around the same price in 2023. Let's see, I don't think this guy can be face down. Well, that's not what this guy does anyway, so I was thinking of Book of the Moon, and that was called the Graveyard. But yeah, Microsoft definitely should have held off on that until the Activision Blizzard deal either fell through or went through. Because if the Activision Blizzard deal fell through, then Microsoft said, well, we've got to raise our price because the Activision Blizzard deal fell through. And you could possibly make a dumb argument that wouldn't be true, but people might buy, as far as we were trying to increase profits, and now we can't increase profits by acquiring a company, so now we're going to increase profits by raising the price. That would be total BS, because obviously Microsoft was sitting on a pile of cash based on the $60 price point that allowed them to acquire several companies in the past few years. And had they just not acquired companies and maintained the price, or even lowered the price, that would have helped the consumer more, as far as financially speaking. But also, if Microsoft just waited until the acquisition went through, if it went through successfully, they could say, well, now we're raising prices and we don't care what you say, which is basically what they're doing, but they're not at risk of anybody filing an antitrust lawsuit. Like, you don't act like a monopoly as you're trying to form a monopoly. It's just bad strategy. Now, this announcement also comes at the exact same time that Microsoft has formally given and agreed with Nintendo for a 10-year Call of Duty exclusivity, non-exclusivity pack, I guess is what you would call it, in which Call of Duty, in some form or fashion, somehow is going to come to the Nintendo Switch for the next 10 years, or come to a Nintendo consoles for the next 10 years. But they made that same offer, which is basically the same offer I think that has already been made a couple of times by Microsoft to Sony, and Sony's gonna say more than likely not good enough. I have to say, though, I think the president of Sony Interactive Entertainment, Jim Ryan, really is just too obsessed on Call of Duty, when the better, bigger argument to be make is to say there are multiple games from Activision Blizzard that are coming out or that have come out that have played a major factor on the PlayStation. And Call of Duty isn't the only game that, and the only reason that this acquisition shouldn't go through, because by focusing so much on Call of Duty, they have opened themselves up to the door where the different countries who have to approve this merger could say, okay, fine, we'll approve the merger, but not with Call of Duty. Call of Duty, you have to make certain promises that it will be always available to be licensed on consoles. And that's not really what Sony wants. Sony wants to kill the merger completely. Or at least Sony wants to cost Microsoft as much money as possible to get the merger approved. And it certainly says something as far as economically that cutthroat political drama happens and is a decent strategy when companies are competitors. The argument has always been competition would be better for the consumers, but in this case, Microsoft wasting their money to get a merger approved because Sony is trying their very best to not get it approved isn't helping anyone, likely. It's not likely going to help PlayStation players in the long run, because any money PlayStation is spending now lobbying people to not allow the merger, that money is coming out of your PlayStation Network subscriptions and out of the sales and the profits of Sony. Any money spent to get the merger approved by Microsoft is coming out of the profits of Microsoft and sales of the games and Xbox Live subscriptions. So the consumer really is in this lose-lose situation where two giant conglomerates are just fighting each other. And it's not like Nintendo is going to come in and then have more money to make a better Switch 2. Nintendo already had enough money to make a better Switch 2 if they cared about that and wanted to do that. Moving on with news, Video Game Chronicles says Modern Warfare 2 and Warzone 2 Season 2 details have seemingly leaked. Check that out if you're interested. Yeah, Microsoft confirms details of a 10-year offer to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation, while opening to providing the same commitment to other platforms and making it legally enforceable. Today's Disney Dreamlight Valley update aims to improve performance, especially on the Switch. I think the fans of Dreamlight Valley probably are already there. Unless they put out kind of a major update that adds like twice as much gameplay mechanic and they can get a lot of word of mouth. I think you've got your Disney fans here. Inherently, Disney is just not as big of a deal as it once was. A game like this probably should be advertised on Disney Plus or given away to people who have Disney Plus a lot more. With Bob Iger being back in charge of Disney, maybe we'll see some different things happen, but I imagine since this more than likely is just a licensed product from Disney, that Bob Iger wouldn't really have a single a direct hand in Dreamlight Valley. The problem here is Dreamlight Valley is really just competing directly with Stardew Valley. And Stardew Valley just has so many versions of itself and such a already established fan base that it's hard to imagine Dreamlight Valley could catch up even with the Disney licenses. Let's see, moving on. UK's best-selling console in 2022 will come down to the wire as only 20,000 units separate all three. PlayStation 5 is currently in the lead, but there's not much in it, it's claimed. Does it particularly matter to me as a United Statesian which console sells best in the UK? Not by much, really, but it does kind of highlight that, particularly this year, there isn't a rabid fandom for a new OLED version of the Switch or a PlayStation 5, which has been hard to get, or an Xbox Series X, which has been kind of hard to get, but not as hard as PlayStation 5. People who want those consoles this year, I think, either could get them or have lost interest in getting them. And this is potentially a year to just save up your pennies for announcements for new consoles either next year or the year after it. I fully suspect the Steam Deck version 2 with some at least minimal upgrade will be announced next year. And I could see myself putting down a reservation for the Steam Deck version 2, since it would only be like a $5 reservation, and then actually purchasing it probably when it was available 6 months later. 2023 will be the year in which we need to keep an eye out for games that start to announce themselves specifically being compatible with the Steam Deck. Not just saying, hey, this is on PC and Steam, but also saying we have gone extra. We've taken the extra distance to make sure that this was playable on the Steam Deck, and we're targeting the Steam Deck. Let's see. Pokemon Violet is now the lowest rated Pokemon game on Metacritic. Performance issues have led some critics scoring the game lower. Which that subtitle almost implies that you shouldn't score a game low because of performance issues. Yeah, DF Retro, I watched their podcast and them talking about just how sad they are about the Callisto Protocol just not working well, and they're basically saying every Unreal Engine game is running into the same pre-loading of shaders, which, like, I really wonder if those games, if you went into the compatibility and clicked the button that said disable full screen optimizations, if that wouldn't make it better or fix it all the way. It would be kind of insane if I knew the solution to fix this problem and DF Retro didn't, but maybe that is it's a possibility. It's unlikely. And inherently, it doesn't really matter because there's got to be a way in which you can encode your game and say, don't do this, don't cause this bug in the first place if you're running Windows 10 or Windows 11 or... Let's go and activate this. Having a lot of people either disconnect or concede today, and great, that helps me win. It is a little weird that they're specifically picking Violet instead of Scarlet, but I guess Scarlet is at 73 and Violet is at 72, so maybe there's just more people. If we went through the entire list here of games, you can see that the highest is like XY at 87 and 88. And there's obviously a problem on Metacritic and other review sites in that of the entire Pokemon series, the highest rated one is at 88, which is fine, and the absolute garbage buggy mess of Scarlet and Violet are at 72. So basically nothing gets below 70, even if the game is completely buggy and unplayable, which that leaves a very small 16-degree points of difference. Like you would have to stretch this out and try and normalize this from 100 to 0, and you would really struggle to normalize it with such a small deviation between the two, the highest and the smallest. Inherently, I don't think I can really do anything here with that. Because of the average scaling here, I can only say Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon is slightly better than Platinum, but then I have to assume Platinum and Legends Arceus and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire are all exactly the same in quality, and then Fire Red and Leaf Green and Ruby and Sapphire are only slightly worse. Like, and if you're not going, there's kind of just no point to have a 100-point scale if you're not going to really differentiate things. I mean, at a certain point, I guess, if you look at schools, like that, if you were going to do the whole Asian school thing where every single student in every single grade is ranked against each other, and at a certain point, that is the case in schools in the West too, and colleges in particular, that you have your valedictorians and such, and some of that is heavily based on grades, although there's actually a lot of cheating in which you get extra GPO points for doing advanced classes, which often require teacher approval to be in advanced classes, which so it becomes more who did the teachers decide we're going to succeed there, instead of a fair competition. But yeah, if you were going to make a system like that, which would be an interesting system, and I guess if I was going to make it competitive with Metacritic, it is a decent idea of a system to say, let's not have a 100-point scale. Let's instead say you've got to rate every single game either better or worse than every other game that ever existed. So if it says, if you want to say, I think this is in the 70th percentile of games, they would say, okay, good. Here's the 75. Here's the exact 75th percent game that we have. Is the game you want to rate better than this or worse than this? And then you would probably need to ask something like, it's way better or way worse. And then it would probably jump to like 75.5 if you said way better, and then show you that game and say, hey, you've got to really just narrow this down. And that would ask about 7 questions probably, just because of the powers of 2, before you would get to your final position. And then you'd probably have to counter those votes into how many people actually have voted for this game in general, and say, well, if this game is rated 100% but only one person has rated it, it probably shouldn't be in the 100th point. If you created a website like this, and I don't know why I'm giving this idea away for free, other than the fact that I probably couldn't afford the hosting on it, you would also be creating custom lists of everybody's games, and you could almost certainly pull in all the games that have been played on Steam and confirm that the people actually have played the game on Steam and have a certain number of hours of playtime. But yeah, you would be creating a custom list at that point for that one person, as you ask them to potentially drag and drop and like put the good games in S tier and the bad games in F tier. Although it's not quite like that. You would need to actually have a single ladder from your best game all the way to your worst games. And honestly, that would give a decent amount of information if you were going to try and then advertise to people through that, to say, hey, we know exactly what kind of player this is, what kind of games this person likes. We don't need to just go into a generic category of video games and advertise every kind of video game to them, or a generic category of adventure games and just advertise adventure games. We can say this guy loves point and click adventure games, particularly made by LucasArts, so we can focus specifically on advertising more games that are similar to that. Of course, something like that would require a lot of people to get on board with a website. It would be a lot like a My Anime list of video games, which very possibly is a website already like that and just people haven't played it. Moving on to video game news, instead of me just rambling and thinking out loud, a LEGO minifig is seemingly confirming that a 2K sports football game. The minifigs appears to tie in with Game Plan's VGC exclusively reported on in February. So VGC is doubling down on their claims. It does definitely feel like LEGO is trying to get other companies to make LEGO games instead of just TT Games remaking the Skywalker saga. With the Warner Brothers and DC merger being kind of a mess, I could certainly see that being part of the thing too. And at a certain level, if LEGO soccer, LEGO football came out, it wouldn't have the most amount of competition as far as soccer games and football games. It potentially gets away from FIFA, which at this point nobody is really happy with FIFA. That was slow, but we've been winning otherwise, so I'll stick with this. So yeah, I guess if LEGO was going to try and not license the appearance of specific characters and just have minifigs, or 2K was going to try not to license people, that might work fairly well. It does seem like there are some kind of fake logos here that maybe aren't the exact logos, although this Nike swoosh might still be copyrightable. I know there was a LEGO minifig in the Queer Eye for the Straight Guy set that they made, where there was a custom costume maker who made this designing jacket, and when they made the minifig for the character on Queer Eye that was wearing that designer jacket and was known for wearing the designer jacket, it seemed like he tried to file a copyright complaint and failed miserably because none of the specific symbols or logos in the LEGO minifig jacket were actually the same symbols and logos. So there would have been like a star somewhere and they put a different star or a moon there. They didn't just actually copy it, they took the generic concept and parried it, and almost certainly they knew what they were doing when doing that. And almost certainly I would have thought they would have just bothered to license it first. So yeah, kid-friendly soccer game makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure I 100% am in love with 2K, but it wouldn't be EA doing it, so this would, I suppose, be in direct competition to EA Sports games, not a replacement. I think 2K at this point is also owned by Embracer Group, so there's, I guess, a question as to whether this really is more just the Embracer Group trying to be THQ again and get back into the field of making kids games, which that's the one thing they haven't done yet. Well, no, they did SpongeBob SquarePants, so I guess they totally did do that already. Alright, so I guess there's really not a lot to say here. This isn't a real announcement for a game, so it's just Video Game Chronicles doubling down and saying they were right without anything more than the fact that there is a Lego minifig, a real world minifig, which you could be totally wrong about that. Lego for 2 or 3 years now have had soccer stadiums for specific soccer football stadiums on sale, and they're very expensive, and you would have to be a major fan of that specific fandom. This year they recently announced, just a couple months ago, the Lego foosball table with a bunch of minifigs, soccer fan minifigs, to make up for the fact that the foosball table is actually rather small for $250 that they're charging it. The soccer stadiums themselves, I think, are somewhere around $300 to $350. Very expensive sets. You'd have to be a major fan. And inherently, the soccer stadiums are so big. Several of the Lego set items have just gotten way too big for what would be reasonable to put on any Lego city in any Lego thing. They're pandering to people who are going to take up their entire basement with Lego sets instead of pandering to people who would take up a single big table for Lego sets. As someone who built a giant table that is probably the equivalent of a medium-sized dining hall table that could serve, I'd imagine you could easily get 10 or 12 people sitting around the Lego table I built. Even at that, I really don't have enough room for a soccer stadium. It would be the only thing that could be highlighted in one section. Okay. I think this is the one you probably want. So yeah, it is very possible that there is no Lego 2K video game coming out, or that it is still just in the works and far, far off. When you look at the other non-TT Lego games that have come out, they've all been very weird and different, and none of them have really played like they were just gonna be minifigs in a game. The mobile Lego game where the minifigs fight each other is probably the closest comparison to a generic Lego soccer football game as far as Lego minifigs being added for no reason, but I think at least one or two of the other Lego games that have come out recently have definitely felt more like you could only make that kind of game based on Lego and not anything else. Moving on, December's PlayStation Plus Essential games are now available to claim. This includes Mass Effect Legendary Edition, Biomutant, and Divine Knockout, which I'll leave it at that. CD Projekt Red is shutting down Witcher Monster Slayer, which is a game I completely forgot even existed. It is also winding down support for the Witcher Gwent Witcher card game, which we already had heard about. This was, I guess, an augmented reality game like Pokemon Go, but creepier, which, yeah. Seems like CD Projekt is getting out of the mobile phone field, basically. Gwent was a mobile phone game, but also was a Steam, there's a Steam version of it, a PC version, but yeah, I could see them not really wanting to continue to maintain things or to update their games on the Apple Store or the Android Store, although they probably have already updated their games from that whole 32 to 64-bit limitation on the Apple Store. So they already have probably committed some amount of effort to that. But I would imagine this is really just more of a case of somebody new being in charge and not worrying about it. I guess people are surrendering more than just straight up disconnects, which I guess this is working for me. Maybe Flowonder doesn't have as much power as a top tier meta deck as I thought, but still has a lot of power as far as just scaring people away. I have in the past said that I really don't see a lot of the toxicity that is claimed in video games. I know definitely that there's some there, but in specific, I haven't seen examples of people getting into a online game and then just in public chat yelling at people and just being nasty and rude and gross so much. I'm separating that behavior from behavior where you're with your friends and your friends are just all saying horrible things because that's how you talk amongst your friends. Like, I really wouldn't call that mean spirit or even particularly inappropriate. That's just what kids do. That's just what adults do. That being said, I always have to say I don't play online games, so I really don't know what the online space is going to be there. And there's a lot of variety there because I imagine a League of Legends player that's an esports professional is probably trying to be a little bit professional, not cause controversy. And even if he was going to say something mean to you, it's probably going to be something like get good and then disconnect real quick to play the next game. He's probably not going to spend a lot of time screwing around there. Internet comment etiquette as a comedian probably is the prime example of somebody who would be actively trying to act toxic. But from the footage he actually shows on his videos, he's being stupid, but he's not really being insulting. And he's not really saying amazingly awful things. And he's usually playing, I think, with his friends or fans, not friends. So I don't even think they care. But I did hear about a comedian who started a Twitch channel, and this comedian is a dirty comedian, and he is actively selling himself as saying that he says the awfulest things to 2-year-olds who are playing video games. But he's playing like Call of Duty, so I think even at that, he's probably joking somewhat. He actually seems to be a decent father himself, so I don't think he really would do that. And that is certainly one thing to remember, is that comedians often say ridiculous, obscene things on stage and when they're performing, and they don't really mean it. And a lot of people that hate comedy don't recognize that that's a possibility. Yeah, that's another surrender. Yep. As long as I keep getting victories, I'll just play my way straight up to diamond level if I can. And then if I make it to diamond level, I'll just stop playing Yu-Gi-Oh! For the rest of the month. We'll just take a vacation. We'll play, or I'll play it doing free play and not ranked for the daily quest. But yeah, I guess there's a possibility that there are people out there that are getting their kicks saying awful things to kids, but inherently that would be people jumping on to either Call of Duty, where kids shouldn't be playing anyways, or people jumping into something like Fortnite or Splatoon, where they shouldn't be playing anyways. Yeah. I look back in my past, and even when I was a kid, I thought it was ridiculous that I would occasionally get in trouble for saying something mean or dirty or using a bad word. Like, that whole fight, even when I was a kid, many, many years ago, felt like that had been done, and that the word policing and the nanny state clutching at pearls concept really should be done with and out the window. But apparently there's something about becoming a parent that reinforces that ideology. I can pretty much guarantee you that 95% of every single parent these days, a young parent that has a kid, was saying the most awful bad words they possibly could get away with amongst their friends when they were a kid. And I don't know where they think that they were so disenfranchised by being able to say those words that they now have to enforce draconian rules on their progeny. Although certainly some of it is definitely enforced by schools. Schools are just kind of backwards and regressive in a lot of ways. And so you have these little dictators of the classroom in teachers who love to make rules and love to put the kids, particularly that they don't like, in trouble. And so the more rules they can make and the more rules they can try and enforce, the more they can stroke their own egos. Which probably would imply that I would have a rough time as a parent, because I would totally laugh in the face of a lot of teachers. It's like, oh, little Johnny said the B word. I'd probably list off 5 B words before I even figured out which one he said, and then I would laugh in the face of the teacher for him saying it. But yeah, inherently, I guess as a kid I was also very quick to want to be out of being treated as a kid, and really just wanted to be considered more like an adult. And sadly, as I became an adult, I realized that the idealized intelligent adults that are shown on TV are few and far between, and actually there's a lot of adults that are just as stupid and just as immature as kids, and you have to deal with them too, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm pretty much rambling here. Let's continue with the video game news. I don't even know where I got onto that rant for. So I guess I'm just saying I'm out there trying to listen for instances of toxicity in game chat to see if it really is a thing. I don't think it's as big of a thing as people talk about it in the news, because I do think a lot of it is clickbait. But there's certainly, I'm not going to bury my head in the sand and say I don't believe there's any instances of that. I think there's probably an average amount of instances of it, of people being jerks and saying mean things in video games, that is probably in line with the average amount of people who are jerks and say mean things in the real world. And that's really all you can ever hope for. Moving on, Elden Ring will receive a free Coliseum update on December 7th. I'm sure fans of Elden Ring will find that interesting. A new Hogwarts Legacy shows off the making of the soundtrack, which I guess if we're down to advertising it by the soundtrack, then they probably don't have anything more visual to show as far as promoting it. I hope Hogwarts Legacy kind of works, but I've hoped for the last 3 or 4 Hogwarts Harry Potter games to kind of work, and none of them seem to be particularly well made or well done. And right now, with the whole Warner Brothers AT&T merger thing that's happening, I couldn't even really explain it. I wouldn't be surprised if they're rushing out Hogwarts Legacy, and it could have potentially had more polish to it. Yeah, it does kind of feel like what happens here is if somebody has a strategy that actually works, then they will continue playing. But if they see this Flawandre's card set and they don't have a strategy against it, there seems to be a high number of people who will just give up and concede. Oh, that was probably not the card to add. Always grab this one, and I don't think this is really the one to grab. Is that going to make this face down defense position? I think it is. Interesting. And what do we want to banish? Probably this one. Not that I think that's going to change too much. I'll just keep on normal summoning things. And I don't remember how much defense this has, so I'm just going to attack with this one. Probably not going to win this turn, but I could have attacked with this one. Probably will win with the next turn if we manage to do damage in the next turn. Continuing on, the first Vampire Survivors DLC will add a new stage, characters, and weapons. Which, Vampire Survivors sounds like an interesting game, but it feels like a game that I've somehow missed. And actually looking at it, it feels like it's a top-down, almost bullet hell shooter game, which is not really what I would have expected from a game called Vampire Survivors. Dead Island 2 Showcase debuts new gameplay, including using zombie powers. Let's watch this trailer. One thing that, we'll watch it blurred, as it were. One thing that I kind of noticed here too is that it seems like they're trying to show one of the characters that will be playable will have a spring replacement foot that they use for running. Which I guess that's fine. Yay for diversity. This is gonna get gross quick as you see a bunch of gore and blood on the ground. Inherently, you're not going to be looking down much and noticing that that character has an artificial foot. And I guess Dead Island in general has been fairly diverse in its characters to begin with, because you had a decent balance of genders and a decent balance of nationalities all on this tropical island on a vacation. And your zombie enemies were, for the most part, pretty diverse, with the exception of there not being any children in the game, which is fine. Like, we can buy into excuses as to why we don't want to have a game where you're fighting zombie children. Seems to be a much bigger cast of characters in this game than in the first game, as far as potentially secondary characters too. So there you have the artificial foot just shown for a brief second there. And you can see you can head stomp with the foot and you can kick with the foot just like it was a regular foot. So no real difference there. If this game plays as well as it kind of looks here, or even slightly better than this way, then we may, after much delays, finally have a Dead Island 2 that would potentially revitalize the Dead Island series and make an interesting gameplay experience. It does put you in this real weird position, certainly, where you're going to have to basically ignore the Dead Island Riptide game and ignore, I think there was another side Dead Island game, and ignore the remake, which somehow made the game part somewhat bad, and kind of ignore some of the bad sections later on in the back half of Dead Island 1. Like, this really has to be a full-on reboot around that. That zombie had a lot of his torso missing. So that would be an interesting twist, certainly, on zombies, if their torso could be 90% missing and you still have to hit them in the head. There's a lot of gameplay being shown here, and because of that, I'm actually looking at the trailer more. Whereas everything up until this point, as far as Dead Island 2, has really just been teasers. Yeah. So finally we see something that feels like an actual game there. Let's just hope they don't rush it out and it isn't a buggy mess. Although, rushing it out almost has a different meaning at this point. It's, let's hope they don't rush out this iteration of Dead Island 2, because obviously it's been in development hell and they've probably restarted the development of Dead Island 2 at least once, if not... Sorry. My phone getting a text message. Oh, doesn't matter. Nearly hurt my back just reaching for my phone there. Yeah. I think it's fairly safe to make the assumption that there has been a reboot at some point in the Dead Island 2 series. Let's just go ahead and summon this one first. Let's see, if I was to activate this, should be able to banish something else. Let's banish this. And then normal summon that. And see, now he could potentially just clear the board and I'd be screwed. Moving on with the news, we probably should make this our last game just because of time management reasons. Like I said on Monday, I wanted to make more Killer 7 footage. I don't think I actually did any footage there at all. Like, so I probably should just say I want to rush because I want to finish early and just be lazy, and that would probably be more honest than saying I'm hoping to potentially make more footage later in the day. Yeah, there's definitely something about these 2-3 hour streams that are exhausting, and the thing that really terrifies me is that I may just be getting tireder and tireder to the point where I can't even do a stream, or that I'd have to severely limit how much I could do of streaming. Like, I don't want to, nobody wants to be disabled certainly, but you don't want to be so disabled that you can't even talk, you can't even play video games, you can't even sit in a chair. Probably an argument for exercising, going on walks or something like that, which would take time and energy, but you almost have to spend energy to gain energy through exercise, and that's what nobody really wants to do. Moving back to video game news, Destiny 2 Season 19 is detailed, including new dungeon, Crucible updates, and more. I assume that at Season 19, Destiny 2 fan base is pretty solidified, and that there isn't like anything that would bring a new audience to Destiny 2. Arguably, the idea of a game as service is highlighted in Destiny 2 in that it doesn't really work, and instead of being at Season 19, they probably should be at Destiny 4 by now. Just take 5 seasons, merge them together, and make that Destiny 2. The first 5 seasons of Destiny 2 would have been Destiny 2. The next 5 would have been Destiny 3. The next 5 would have been Destiny 4. And we might be at Destiny 6 now, or Destiny 5. not sure if the first 5 seasons of Destiny 2 actually would make a complete 60-hour game even. I'm mostly just speculating there. Let's see. Tribute summon there, tribute summon there. Summon this. Return that to the deck. And I guess return the card to the hand. Guess we'll say yes. We'll return that. There is a danger of saying yes to something and not really knowing what it's going to do. Okay. Let's see if we can activate this now. Maybe we can summon this. Maybe by banishing this. No, we'll summon that. Let's see. No, we'll summon this, I guess. Normal summon this. Okay, well, maybe I could have summoned one more thing, maybe it doesn't matter. And we can attack with a direct attack if we care to, but it won't do anything. Here Video Game Chronicles has that same article. Xbox commits to bringing Call of Duty to Nintendo for 10 years if it's acquired by Activision Blizzard. Interesting how they are making a fairly long headline, which a lot of video game articles really should have longer headlines than they do. But they're specifically doing it so that they point out they're only committing to this if it acquires Activision Blizzard. Let's see. The exact quote here is, Microsoft has entered into a 10-year commitment to bring Call of Duty to Nintendo following the merger of Microsoft and Activision Blizzard. Microsoft is committing to bringing more games to more people, however they choose to play. There's another quote. So there is an if there, which I guess doesn't mean too much, because the only scenario that would be contrary to that would be if the Activision Blizzard merger didn't go through and instead they Activision Blizzard themselves solely decided to not put the games on the Nintendo Switch. Which I guess that could happen. And I could certainly see Activision Blizzard saying, hey, we're not going to bother to try and get this to run on the Nintendo Switch, because that's a nightmare. And he is speaking in generalities here, because being committed to putting it on the Switch for the next 10 years is ridiculous, because they don't, I doubt Nintendo wants Call of Duty on the Switch in the next 4 years. They would want it on the Switch too. Almost certainly. Just toss this to save myself some frustration and time. Let's see. Moving on, Diablo 4's release date has seemingly appeared online. A full announcement for the release date is expected later this week, but apparently it's coming out June 5th at 11 p.m. Which, okay, does that really matter at all? No. Like, I am interested in seeing what the actual reviews of Diablo 4 will be when they come out. Although, in a lot of ways, if people have early access and they're reviewing the game, they may be having a different experience, since it is somewhat of a live service game. And if people don't have early access to the game, then they probably need to put 60 to 200 hours into the game before you could even have a clue as far as whether the game is good or not. Alright, let's do this. Do this. Activate this. Activate the rest of this. It is still very slow here. Just a real slow experience. Summon this, yes. Seriously, that's all I can do? Must have summoned that already. Moving on, Yuji Naka has been rearrested over alleged Final Fantasy VII, the First Soldier inside trading scheme. It's claimed that the former Sonic team had got confidential info on the game before it was announced. Although, I think this rearrest is on a different charge of insider trading. Which I guess it was alleged that the first time it was a similar scheme surrounding the mobile game Dragon Quest Tact, developed by Amy. So now it's Final Fantasy VII, the First Soldier. So seems like this was probably a standard method of operating, or they're just doing a lot of investigations into his financials and making assumptions that he's guilty if he did anything out of the ordinary, which is kind of what you'd have to do. I wonder if in part this is why Yuji Naka was kind of kicked out of Sega and in the process, in the release of Balan Wonderworld, I wonder if Sega straight up found out this information and did their own internal investigation and fired him, and then didn't report it to the police, or reported it to the Japanese police and they were just incredibly slow. I wouldn't be surprised if the Japanese police are incredibly slow. In a lot of ways, I wouldn't be surprised if the Japanese do all of the prosecutor research and investigation before they even arrest somebody, and then they show a big document to the Japanese people, and then typically the Japanese people just confess and plead guilty then and there, and it just goes to a judge, a panel of judges for sentencing. Yeah. We don't know. It's all allegedly at this point still. And maybe Yuji Naka is not guilty of any of the accusations around him, but the fact that he's being arrested says something. Unless you're going to go down conspiracy theories and say somebody just has it out for Yuji Naka and they have the police in his pocket, which that would be fairly conspiratorial. Noticeably, Yuji Naka hasn't come out and denied being arrested or said anything like that, so at a certain level you kind of have to assume that the arrests are at least accurately being described. The problem with this deck is you really don't have anything you can do. Like if I summon this, and I take this one, and let's just say this one, and do that. Yeah. I am just out of moves there. We are just getting kind of the same articles from the same source even here at Video Games Chronicles. Elden Ring version 1.08 patch opens up Coliseums and adds new hairstyles. Like, basically the exact same article from Video Games Chronicles that we saw 10 minutes ago. Nintendo UK is giving away Mario Kart Live or Skyward Sword HD free with Switch OLEDs this Christmas. The offer starts on Friday and will run for the rest of the year. Mario Kart Live is the ones where you actually control the RC remote control car. I bet Nintendo never does anything with that ever again. And yeah, overpriced, frankly, at $100. I would say. And then Skyward Sword at $50 is probably a little overpriced too, for a re-release of an old game. And that is yet another example, I would say, of people getting a little bit more desperate to sell things than they really should be, because there basically shouldn't be any sales at this point. Like we are on December 7th. There's 2 or maybe 3 more weekends in which you could go shopping for Christmas gifts. You'd expect that it would just be incredibly packed and people would be buying things at very little discount. If they didn't get a discount around Black Friday, then there really shouldn't be any new discounts. I did think about like how Walmart in particular, which is a big company that's likely to get a lot of returns, could potentially save themselves some frustration by giving an extra week of returns if you buy it on Black Friday, Cyber Monday. Just to say, hey, you know what? We'll give you an extra week, an extra 2 weeks, extra 3 weeks to file for a return. You don't have to be in a rush about it. Free returns for anything purchased between Black Friday and December 31st until January or February 1st. Just, yeah. That way you have less people in your store, less people trying to return things. Also saw a thing on Reddit that was interesting about how they figured out a way to make their own barcodes and put them on unpurchased prepaid cards scammers have. And so what they do is they steal the unactivated cards, probably in bulk. You steal quite a few of them. You take them home. You have the barcodes. You make barcode stickers, basically, to cover up the original barcodes that are connected to the stolen unactivated cards. And then when somebody goes to activate a card and load it with money when it's activated at the cash register, the card that you stole becomes activated instead, which isn't a terrible scam, really. And one way you certainly could prevent that from happening is just by having prepaid cards behind the glass or behind a checkout counter so people couldn't manipulate them. Also, if you are going to purchase a prepaid card, make sure that there's not a sticker on where the barcode is. Generally speaking, you shouldn't get gift cards in the first place. Give cash if you're going to give cash. Limiting where somebody can spend something with gift cards is unnecessary and stupid. It's just adding the risk that they won't spend all the money on the gift card, or they will spend more money than on the gift card because they have to get every single penny off the gift card. Let's see. The first episode of Netflix's Sonic Prime will be streamed through Roblox this weekend. The free-to-play game Sonic Speed Simulator will be showing a full 25 or 45-minute episode for a week. Sonic Prime is a terrible name for Netflix to have named it, but I suppose maybe Sega demanded it be called Sonic Prime. I don't know what else you would call it. There was Sonic the Hedgehog again, maybe. Even with all this, we still would need 2 more Link summoning, Pendulum summoning, or Fusion summoning, and to destroy 1 more card. Yeah, these daily quests are getting more specific, and by being more specific, I'm less likely to actually get them all done in a single stream. Alright, let's just focus on the news now, since it's been an hour and 45 minutes. 49 minutes. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe DLC Wave 3 is out now. Check that out if you're interested. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe latest update adds custom items feature. Players can now choose which items appear in offline races as well as in certain online modes. So I guess you can get rid of the blue shell if you hate the blue shell, as an idea. Let's see. Microsoft claims Sony is more interested in talking to regulators than Xbox about an Activision deal. Phil Spencer's thinks he has a good idea of how to build a win-win relationship with Sony. Which that's a very different quote than the headline. And yeah, we really are just getting the exact same articles 2 or 3 times from Video Games Chronicles. I know I streamed a little early on Monday, so maybe some of these articles are from Monday and then they're getting reiterated on Tuesday or Wednesday, but man, it's certainly repetitive. The Days Gone director has blamed middling reviews on, quote, woke reviewers and tech issues. James Garvin says critics couldn't handle a gruffy white biker looking at his date's butt. I don't recall anybody really complaining about that in Days Gone. Like I can totally say tech issues I do think people were complaining about. Had reviewers who couldn't be bothered to actually play the game, which I'll grant you that. There almost certainly are reviewers who didn't actually play the game, but at a certain point you're going to have to name names and show receipts on that claim, like giving review codes to specific reviewers and then being able to track the amount of time they actually played on that. And 3, it had woke reviewers who couldn't handle a gruff white biker looking at his date's butt. And then here we've got a whole paragraph explaining what woke is, which, alright, let's go down that path as far as what Video Games Chronicle thinks woke stands for. Woke is a term that originally referred to those aware of social injustices such as racism, sexism, and all other forms of discrimination. In recent times, however, it's been adopted as a catch-all term by right-leaning people to refer to those who favor progressive political ideas. I don't know if I fully agree with that because I personally use the term woke all the time, and I think plenty of people who are not right-leaning people use the term woke all the time. So I think that's a bad description to say it's a term only, or it's a catch-all term only used by a certain number of people. That's kind of inherently some of the complaints against woke people, is that they see everything as a team and a B team, and anybody who is against the woke people is in the B team. Like, honestly, I would not describe someone who favors progressive political ideas as woke as much as I would say people who favor specific, extreme, ridiculous progressive political ideas. Like, you want to talk universal basic income? All day I'll be with you. I wouldn't call somebody woke for that. If you want to talk healthcare for all, I wouldn't call somebody woke for that. I don't think Bernie Sanders is woke per se, and he has probably the most progressive political platform. Arguably, most Democrats aren't even leaning on much of a progressive political platform. Inherently, you get back to Metacritic and you see that Days Gone got 71, so it's not even that poorly reviewed. And here's an interesting thought. Should you give a voice to a random response on Twitter in the same level that you are reporting on somebody who is the director of a video game? Are those voices, it's an interesting argument about should you be amplifying certain people's voices over others in news reporting, and inherently in news reporting you should be amplifying it. The President of the United States should be reported on because it's newsworthy. Some random guy in his basement responding to the President of the United States on Twitter is not newsworthy. and shouldn't be reported on. Yeah. I kind of want to play Days Gone if it was good, if it was ever fixed and patched. Inherently, if I was the director of Days Gone, you've already kind of messed with your relationship with Sony. That fell apart. This kind of feels like the Days Gone director is just getting further and further isolated from people in general. So I guess that was his date being flown off right there in the trailer. Um, and then he just found the ring and she was dead, I guess. Yeah, it doesn't seem like he's making any friends or would likely ever be put into the position where he can make another game. But yeah, I would say the thing that really screwed Days Gone is PlayStation. They just didn't, as a publisher, give enough time to fix the bugs, and maybe that's because the game developers were just bad at fixing bugs. This is a game that's set around like a biker gang collection of people and in kind of a middle of America area. So it's not super surprising that it would be white, gruff, redneck type characters. And honestly, that's not a terrible thought to say, how would a biker gang handle a zombie apocalypse when you are just stuck on a bike and where you probably have more access to guns than most. His story trailer makes Days Gone look pretty interesting. Not great by any means, and that certainly is part of the problem, is that its only main selling point was that it was going to be a whole bunch of zombies chasing after you. But it didn't look terrible. I didn't personally have any dislike of Days Gone as it was being advertised. It's just that it came out, people said it was buggy. There is an interesting thought here. Did Days Gone ever come to Steam? Let's investigate that. So, see if we can search DuckDuckGo for Days Gone. Days Gone is on Steam. So 91% positive here in the last 30 days as far as Days Gone on Steam, and overall 92% positive with 31,000 reviews. That's almost certainly because the bugs had been fixed in the game, which was really the only problem with the game. So if anything, the issue now with this story coming out and this guy posting this post is that he's probably catching less flies with vinegar than honey, to use that phrase. It's probably scaring off some people. I'm a little bit less interested in playing this game now that there's a controversy around it, or potentially a jerk who's going Kanye or going crazy around the game. Although inherently I don't think the director is actually connected at all. This is on my wish list. You can see this has been as low as $20. Let's see, November 22nd. At that price point, I think it probably works fairly well. And almost certainly almost certainly there's not going to be that many reviews. Wonder what bin studios otherwise have got on Steam. Well, there's no way to tell because clicking on that just brought me to the PlayStation Publisher page, which tells me how many PlayStation games that were third-party or first-party PlayStation games. Yeah. I'd have to potentially look at each of these games to see if any of these others have been done by bin studios. Yeah. It probably is just one of those cases where that's not something you should say out loud on Twitter, and inherently there are just people that are getting irate more and more every day. Because yeah, people are getting crazier and posting things on Twitter and online when there should just be a realization of like social media protection, a social media condom type mentality where, hey, if you're in a situation where you might get a disease, you should probably protect yourself by creating a barrier between you and that other thing. On Twitter, the example here would be, if you possibly are going to get in trouble by tweeting something on Twitter, you should not tweet it on Twitter. Like, save that for your journal, your written in paper journal that will never see the light of day if you're really down to that, or save it for your therapist. I think a lot of this should straight up just be said to the therapist. Like, even if you have feelings and you believe something to be true, a level of professionalism, if you has always been needed in many industries, and unfortunately in game industry in particular, a level of professionalism is that you glad hand a lot of people and toe the party line, and you act like you're a woke liberal more than you actually are, because that's just always been the case. There's plenty of right-leaning actors and actresses that either don't say anything and don't let their opinions known, or pretend like they're supporting everything that everybody else in Hollywood is saying, even if they really don't care. Because that's just how they keep getting work. Yep. And yeah, I think the Days Gone director has just already burnt too many bridges, so now he is just going to continuously say more and more. So we may have our own Kanye, for lack of a better term, that is just going to continuously post more and more. Although at a certain point too, it falls on Video Games Chronicles to have bothered to report on him in the first place. What he said there is not really newsworthy or relevant. They could very easily have not written that article and not spread drama, if not starting drama. Moving on with news, Valve says the long-term Call of Duty Steam offer is not needed as, quote, Xbox always falls through on its promises. Gabe Newell offers shows of support as Microsoft seeks to push through the Activision Blizzard deal. So yeah, Steam is seemingly not a threat, or not threatened at all by Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard. I wouldn't be surprised if Valve would like to acquire a few companies too. Honestly, Valve should have been acquiring companies about 5 to 10 years ago. That would have made a decent amount of sense to help them get new blood and potentially make more games. Particularly if Valve just acquired a company and then had the company continue to run business as usual, instead of ingesting a company and then making the employees that are new work the way the old Valve employees work, which is to say barely do any work at all. Seems like Nintendo doesn't have a comment so far as the offer to say publicly, and this is that bookmarked article, so we don't need to talk about that. So now we're at the Gamatsu article, this week's game releases, Dragon Quest Treasures, which on the Holy Night and more. This is one I think we'd already covered. It was a fairly light week, both for digital and physical and digital releases. An alien survival horror game called Grey Hill Incident launches in Q2 for the PS4, 5, and PC, and other consoles, which I have no idea what the other consoles possibly could be, that they wouldn't just bother to name it. You don't get a lot of alien abduction stories where it actually is the main focus. Yeah, and honestly this game doesn't look that good. Running through the cornfield here in darkness, you can hide a lot of asset flipping and hide a lot of stuff, but the actual gameplay here I don't think is that much. I guess if I was going to do an alien abduction, the grays in particular look awful there. If I was going to do an alien abduction game, I would try to do something that would just be terrifying, like Fire in the Sky. And I guess in a lot of ways, that game Scorn that came out recently, a couple months ago, is an alien abduction story. The first Prey game is an alien abduction story, but they all feel a little bit different. Part of the problem with it's almost approaching unethical to do an alien abduction story, since I personally believe alien abduction things tend to be just night terrors, and that people see aliens or feel like they're being abducted because they're having night terrors or lucid dreaming, things like that. So those nightmares and night terrors tend to happen when people talk about that, and when you hear about it, it's a thought. It's almost like a computer virus that goes into your brain. So talking about it alone, while therapy usually says you should talk about your fears and nightmares, it can also cause more fears and nightmares. So making a game that was like hyper realistic around that, you'd have to be careful. I definitely want to put a content warning in front of that, as far as saying, like, we personally do not believe aliens are real. We suspect that it's night terrors. Night terrors can be exacerbated or created by people who think about these things. If you're prone to night terrors, we recommend not playing this game, type thing. Type warning. Which that may scare off half your audience alone just by saying you don't believe aliens are real. But yeah, crazy people that do believe aliens are real, the real crazy ones, will almost certainly look at a game based on that is an alien abduction game and say, oh, this is actually the Illuminati just coming out and admitting that aliens actually do exist too. So that would be an unfortunate side effect of that, making that kind of game. Moving on, Star Wars Jedi Survivor launches March 16th for the PC, PS4, and Xbox Series. This is the sequel to Star Wars Fallen Order, I believe. Which I'm not sure there was a Game of the Year version of Star Wars Fallen Order. Let's see if we can see. Like, the launch date originally on Steam said that date. And not, yeah, Fallen Order here. In comparison on Steam, rated very positively. There is a deluxe edition I guess maybe instead of making Game of the Year editions, deluxe editions would make more sense. I'm not sure if you get too much. You get a digital art book, a skin, another skin, and a director's cut behind the scenes video for the deluxe edition. Which generally I tend to get the deluxe editions no matter what, but yeah, that's kind of expensive. And right now, this is at its lowest price ever. What you can get Fallen Order for $4.79 if you don't want the deluxe edition. I could also get Battlefront 2 and this game and Squadrons for about $50. This is all EA Origin stuff still, which that kind of sucks, but whatever. Project L Developer Diary, Gameplay Basics and Tag. See, look at a fighting game's gameplay and tag system. This is Project L from Riot Games. Which, how long is this? Yeah, this is more of a Talking Heads piece. Well, this might be something, but it is certainly going to be an attempt at having a new fighting game happen when there's quite a lot of competition for fighting games at the moment, and competition coming up for fighting games with the release of like Street Fighter 6, 7, or 8, whichever one it is. Moving on, Wave Break is coming to Xbox Series and Xbox One on December 21st. It's currently available for Switch and PC. What kind of game is it? A skateboarding game. Interesting, it's called Wave Break. If it's a skateboarding game. Yeah, it seems to be half skateboarding, half skiboarding. And honestly, it feels like it's pretty arcadey. In how it's done, and weirdly it seems to have guns in it. Well, that is a lot, certainly. This game is on fall list, and I guess we can put it on the wish list if it's not out of early access. That being said, I couldn't imagine playing Wave Break and thinking that that was a fair alternative for Mario Kart. Power Wash Simulator for the PS4, PS5, and Switch release dates to be announced in early 2023, so basically an announcement for an announcement. God of War Ragnarok Photo Mode update is now available, which, you know, these photo modes are kind of pointless. Like, it seems like it is literally the developers of games trying to accommodate mainstream video game journalists and no one else, because I personally have never played a game with a photo mode and thought to myself, now would be the perfect time to pause the game, disrupt the action, disrupt the footage I'm probably recording, because I do long plays from the beginning to the end of playing a game. But yeah, I can't imagine a time where I would disrupt the action, even if I was just playing for myself, to pause the game and take a photo. And even if I did take a photo, it almost certainly would not be in any kind of specific theme for what thumbnails would be for YouTube, which is the only thing I really would use the photos for in the first place. And on that note, there is a growing experiment on YouTube to get rid of thumbnails completely, because what they're rolling out is just instant playback impressions where you just get a impression counted if somebody hovers over a video for, I think it was about 10 seconds, watching the instant playback. So there very possibly is going to be a case where someone will see a thumbnail for half a second on the video, and then it will immediately just start playing, and then if they sit with it for 10 seconds, it's considered an impression, and I think at a certain point after 10 seconds it would just be considered a view, even if they never actually clicked on the video and watched it, which will be interesting to see how that works if there are multiple videos on the screen at the same time and they're all instant playing. But yeah, it probably would help a lot of content creators, particularly content creators like me who aren't artists and don't have thumbnail creators, to get away from thumbnails and go to instant playback. That being said, it does then put even more of an emphasis in the first couple of seconds, first 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds of a video, to just jump into the action as much as possible, both visually more than even audio wise, but audio wise also. So like the next evolution of that almost certainly would be teaser videos that are not the first 10 seconds but the most exciting 10 seconds of the video. But yeah, I'm not particularly good at jumping into action in the first 10 seconds of a video, so that could potentially hurt me. Moving on, SpongeBob SquarePants The Cosmic Shake launches January 31st in 2023. Pre-orders include a costume pack and featuring 7 costumes. There almost certainly have been hundreds of games that I've bought that had pre-order extras and I never got any of them, and I have never been upset about that at all. Like, almost certainly when there is a game that gives you something more than costumes, some item that is potentially pay to win for pre-ordering, those items tend to ruin the experience of the game anyways, so I'm not upset about missing that content either. Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion is coming to the PS4 on December 20th, and that game definitely wins the award for the silliest name I've ever heard. Trinity Fusion adds Xbox Series and Xbox One versions. What is Trinity Fusion? It's a Metroidvania platformer game. I do think there's more games like this than I first thought on Steam, and I probably need to go back and check how many Metroidvania type games actually are on Steam. It may be that we are just also seeing a surge in the development of Metroidvania games after games like Dead Cells came out and were highly successful. Elden Ring Coliseum updates launches December 7th. We already talked about that. Disney Dreamlight Missions in the Uncharted Space update is now available, and we've, I think, mostly talked about that. Also, seems like a lot of items are Christmas themed. Gigabash DLC Godzilla 4 Kaiju Pack and version 1.1 update is now available, which this is one of several kaiju fighting games, although this is possibly one of the better ones too. What is this actually on? It says Steam. Let's see. Yep. Gigabash somehow is something that I missed, or I just decided to not put on the wish list. It's single player, or it says it has a single player mode, so it should be on the wish list. Things still feel like they are falling through the cracks even though I put so much effort into looking at every game that comes out. A co-op roguelike first-person shooter called Perish launches February 2nd for PC. This looks somewhat unique as a possible Quake-type game. I guess the question to ask here is, does a game like this need to have some connection to something that we've already seen like Quake or Doom? And does it need real platforms and platforming and story? Or can it really just be like Quake where you're running around a bunch of places shooting a bunch of enemies? Because Perish definitely feels like it may be fairly light on story. Vampire Survivors DLC Legacy of the Moonspell has been announced, which I guess that might be slightly different information, or that might be the exact same information that Video Games Chronicles had. Sword of the Necromancer Revenant debut trailer and screenshots are available. These characters almost are getting to the point of like that Code Lyoko animation style, which is very weird. But mostly I would just say it's polygon, low polygon characters that you're not going to zoom in. It's fairly odd though to have a female character with a full-on six-pack that is this pronounced. That's a little weird, I would say, but whatever. There should be at least one person like that. But seemingly this is supposed to be the flat 2D version of that 3D pink-haired girl, and then this is supposed to be the flat 2D version of this blonde-haired girl. And yeah, they don't even have the same hairstyles. That doesn't scream quality content to me. So, not particularly interested in that. Gris is coming to the PS5, Xbox Series, Xbox One on December 13th. Which, yeah. Again, almost certainly a game that is already on Steam and is already on my wish list. This is one of a couple games where it's a platforming with some musical influence, great soundtrack type stuff. I think part of this game is that it's probably not been discounted enough. $5 might be alright for it, but paying $17 for this game is probably a little bit too much. Apparently a statue had its nipples removed at some point, which that's kind of ridiculous, but whatever. A game called Melon Journey Bittersweet Memories launches March 7th, 2023. Looks kind of like a Game Boy adventure game. I don't know if I really could play something that's going for the Game Boy visuals and the feel of a Game Boy adventure game. Yeah, the smaller resolution limits you quite a bit, and the lower color palette limits you quite a bit. I just don't know if I could get over those limitations. Like, in a lot of ways, when you look at the Link's Awakening remake, it felt fairly necessary to make a game that would have been a Game Boy game originally, just completely re-visualize it and remaster it to feel like a modern game and on a bigger screen and playable and make sense on a bigger screen. Had Nintendo not done that and just sold Link's Awakening as a Game Boy port that just looked exactly like the original version of Link's Awakening, I don't think I would have bothered to play that. River City Girls 2 launches December 15th worldwide. It's already available in Japan and Asia. Unfortunately, according to Famitsu, it was not a particularly good game, which that sucks. And I very possibly would just ignore the reviews if I got around to playing River City Girls 1, and I would probably go ahead and jump into playing River City Girls 2. In part, I think maybe part of the problem is they should have waited a couple more years before they came out with River City Girls 2 instead of just releasing it almost like a year or two after the first River City Girls. It is also possible that Famitsu is considering River City Girls 2 and comparing it to the River City Ransom games that are the best of the best in that group of games, and so it may be being held to a higher standards. We already looked at the Dead Island trailer screenshots. Screenshots here I think are pretty much just taken from the trailer. They are literally screenshots, not advertisement shots that are added in the press packet given to websites. In Gamatsu's case, Genshin Impact version 3.3 update is now available. I do think Genshin Impact has several Christmassy type outfits if that interests you. A game called Gozoku Tantai no Suri has a debut trailer and 5 minutes of footage for the PS4 and Switch. I think I may have already looked at this. This is a visual novel. Yep. Visual novel slash mystery game, it looks like. It's connected to the Utawara Mono Rirei Mono. I probably am not pronouncing that right. Somehow connected to that series. We already talked about Microsoft entering a 10-year commitment to bring Call of Duty to Nintendo platforms, which that is a much better headline than to say to bring it to the Switch, because again, 10 years from now, nobody's going to be releasing anything on the Switch. It's also committed to continuing offering it on Steam. Here you can see Gamatsu doesn't really have too much extra to say here compared to Video Games Chronicles, which had a lot extra to say. Here's the Famitsu review scores, giving this game a 27 out of 40. Pokemon Scarlet a 38 out of 40, which is actually interesting that they're giving Scarlet and Violet such a high score, which I guess that means they are just straight up turning a blind eye to any glitches and problems, which maybe Famitsu in particular has never reviewed a game based on its flaws as far as technical problems, and has only reviewed games based on the quantity or quality of, I guess, the idealized version of the game. That being said, I still don't know if there's quite enough of a justification for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet to be rated so highly, because I don't think the story is particularly good or the characters are particularly that good. Rumblefish, in contrast, Rumblefish 2 is getting 30 out of 40. Binary Haze Interactive has launched a countdown website for a new title announcement, which is going to end on December 12th at 7:30 a.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So I guess check back at that time if you really care. Like, Binary Haze Interactive is not even a company that I recognize. They developed Ender Lily's Quantus of the Nights, which I would have to click on this just to try and figure out what that game is. It looks like it's very possibly one of these Final Fantasy looking games. Metroidvania side-scrolling action video game. A game called Dyschronia Chronos Alternate is coming to the PlayStation VR 2 at launch. Which looks like you've got maybe tanks and a chibi anime girl. I guess the PlayStation VR 2 is probably going to get released a little bit earlier than I thought it would. They don't seem like they're going to wait till Black Friday of 2023. Either that or they're just trying to really build up a lot of hype around the VR 2 for 2023. They're certainly not releasing it in 2022. It's too late for that. The game The Last Worker is also adding a PlayStation VR 2 version and a Jungle Pronto physical edition. But The Last Worker is a game that's actually going to be not VR exclusive, if I understand this correctly. And it runs both in standard and VR modes. It does not require a VR headset. And it could also just be a very weird game in the first place. My middle button not really closing tabs as much as it's opening other tabs because I'm middle clicking on pictures. Clive and Wrench Christmas trailer and retail released confirmed for US and Canada. This looks like this is going to potentially be some attempt at a kids game, 3D platforming game. Which there could be something here as far as just like we're gonna try and make a Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong Country type game. Let's see, Moss and Moss Book 2 are coming to the PlayStation 2 at launch, which at that point that's just an announcement of an old game being ported. The fact that the VR games from PlayStation VR 1 games are not forward compatible is a big problem, and this is kind of the first example of somebody announcing that we're going to sell the games a second time for PlayStation VR people or PlayStation VR 2 people. Atari and Lamsloft have announced Aka R for basically everything. I guess this is going to be some attempt at a arcade game. Yeah, I don't recognize this if this is actually a real arcade game that they're porting. I suspect that that's not what this is. I suspect that this is a new bullet hell type top-down shooter game. And because it's limiting itself, if this is a new game, if it's limiting itself to look like an old game, it's, in my opinion, suffering greatly because of that. And then Intergram announces a visual novel called Sudama Relation for PS4, Switch, and PC. Seems like there are two covers, a reversible cover coming out. And I guess we don't have anything else there. Alright, so let's start going through the games that have come out on Steam. Hello Neighbor 2, getting a mixed review, which, yeah, that sucks, but I'm going to give it a follow just to be generous and make a YouTube short around it, since Hello Neighbor 2 is somewhat relevant. Magic Staves here just looks like it's a tower defense game. And yeah, I gotta find somewhere to click War of Kings if I'm gonna middle click. Doesn't look like anything. Does The Last Escape potentially look interesting? I'd say no. Does Pirate's Gold look any interesting? Let's say no. Let's keep an eye out and see if this is the same developer putting out multiple games. Chicken Rage. It's not the same developer, but it is very possible that somebody just made up several developer publisher names. This is the same developer. Inherently, if you can just make up a name of your publisher and your developer, you could get around any limitations on stopping specific people from publishing a bunch of games. This is a THQ Nordic game that's mixed. But since Steam Direct costs $100 to list a game, you would have their real names and their credit card information. So unless somebody is straight up making false credit card identities or stealing people's identities, you still would be able to fairly easily limit people from flooding Steam with fairly generic, repetitive games. And in this case, I would say Sealed 35 Games is not putting out the worst games I've ever seen on Steam, but there's really no reason why they should be putting 3 or 4 games out at the same time. These definitely feel like these are more programming tests or projects than they are finished products. Land of Plenty. It looks weird, and it's rated very positively, and it's, I guess, now out. So I'll make a YouTube short around that. And I guess inherently, might as well just put that on the wish list. Anyways. Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I guess this was exclusive on Uplay before, and now has come to Steam. May have been an Epic exclusive. Mirror Forge looks creepy. Is rated positively, so I'll give that a follow. We've yet to run into any garbage games so far. Farmer Force looks pretty bad. Well, yeah, I guess to say garbage is probably the wrong term, but yeah, we have yet to see an excessive amount of garbage games, and we just have seen slightly above garbage tier games. And really, there at this point is just no safe point where an adult game isn't going to pop up as long as I have the adult option enabled. So the next game is Hinta Waifu Puzzle, which is a collection of, well, how would I describe this? It is flat 2D anime girls, I would say. The color palette with blue hair and bright orange hair and pink hair all seems to be more in that colorful palette than a standard natural palette of just browns, blacks, and potentially a natural redhead. It is a collection of, I think these are slide puzzles. Yep, tile slide puzzles, and a collection of anime girls that seem to mostly lean towards being fairly large-breasted, but there are a couple that are more medium-sized breasts. One that you might even call somewhat small, but still would probably be a C cup. There is full nudity, kind of top and bottom, but no screenshot showing any indication of any men or intercourse. It's $1.99 and it's English only. And I guess that's all I really can say about it. The next game on Steam is called My Escort Company, and it is also an adult game with I guess I'd still kind of call it flat 2D animation, but it's leaning like it was 3D models that have been flattened. And I would kind of call it more of a natural game, even though there is a character that has pink hair. Like it feels a lot less anime. There's like 3 characters. They all seem to be fairly similar in bust size and breast size. It feels like it might be a visual novel, but I couldn't really tell you. It might be a simulation game where you're the pimp and you're running the escorts around. That would make sense for the name. It's labeled as early access for $8.99. It claims to have full English audio. One of the recent events and announcements has full-on nudity in that screenshot too, which, yeah, it does seem like the adult content side really just loves to have full nudity, which is funny because none of the screenshots in the actual game has full nudity. Like all the, I guess, you know, come to think of it, I can just straight up show this game because there's nothing being really shown here in any of the screenshots. But yeah, it definitely comes off as this is more of a Westerner just drawing girls and not trying to draw anime girls. And I guess at this point, what I want to do is, if I'm covering an adult game, even if I can show an adult game, is I probably should pan off so that the next game has a slightly higher percentage chance of being an adult game also. This is just a visual novel called My Lovely Wife, and the animation style doesn't look amazingly great. Even for a long neck character, that is a fairly long neck on this character, and the proportions just seem perhaps inconsistent and just not that good. And I'll just leave it at that. This one's free in English only. Next we have Kingdom Under Fire, A War of Heroes. It just looks like an old game, but it's not an old game I particularly recognize. Gold Edition. People don't even use the phrase Gold Edition anymore. Maybe they should bring that back. I'll give this a follow just to see if there's some relevancy around it, but it would be a hard sell to me since it's not something I'm nostalgic for. Here we have Yin Zhan, the cultivation card game, which looks like it's a Chinese themed game. I don't know if this is, I guess maybe it's a card based fighting game. There might be something to that. English and Chinese. What this does, as far as a trick that a lot of Chinese games doesn't do, is that it's not trying to run before it walks. Just having a fighting game based on cards and having a nice widescreen interface and nice looking game works a lot better. Also, these interfaces aren't full of text. You can see that there's a couple of currencies here, but then no in-app purchases mentioned at all. So I'm going to uniquely give this a follow, and in the hope that at some point we might start to see good Chinese games made from Chinese companies. I'll give this a follow too. This is an online PvP game, so it's not something that actually I should put on the follow list because I'd never play it, but I will make a short around it. There are several games out there that are mostly interconnecting via a web service, so you can play it on your phone and play it on different computers. It's not a terrible way to make a party game since everybody probably has a phone on them in most party games. Here we have a game called Gastova, The Witch of Arca, which kind of feels like a Shantae type game, platforming and fighting. I'll give that a follow. There could be something there. Dragonair, Silent Gods. Looks kind of like a Diablo MMO game. English and Chinese. Again, maybe I'll make a follow around that, but I won't bother to put it on the follow list because I wouldn't play an MMO. Wolf Team Reboot. Yeah, I don't think there's enough polish to put that on the follow list. The Last Job. Looks like an asset flip horror game. Yeah, we really haven't seen a lot of those today, which that's a good thing. Monster Lab Shooter. Looks like an asset flip game. Mega Demon Blaster doesn't look interesting. It's Smart Games flooding Steam also. Black Knight. I'll give that one a chance. Nightbot just kicked in, which maybe means somebody tried to spam me and it got blocked on the chat. Or maybe Nightbot just glitched. That's a possibility too. But yeah, I don't see any comments on the chat. I haven't really been seeing a lot of views on the streams lately either, so even though I may be getting 200 or 300 extra views from YouTube Shorts, it's not seemingly translating to more views on the streams, and I haven't really paid enough attention to see if it's translating to more views on the pre-recorded footage, but I suspect it isn't. Yep. Honestly, if I didn't feel the need to go through the games that came out on Steam and the news, I could see myself not doing the streams at all. Yeah, Nightbot just kicked in again. Yet there are no comments showing up on the chat. Let's see. Let me come over here and just double check. No, I don't really see any options here that would be filtering out the chat or anything like that. Individuals have been blocked, certainly, for spamming people. Unsold Case Fatal Clue Collector's Edition. How much is this? 13. I feel like these kind of hidden object adventure games probably deserve YouTube Shorts, even if I'm not interested in playing them myself. Like there is a level of curation certainly that I am doing to the YouTube Shorts I'm making, but hidden object games in particular have been ones that I've just sworn off because I'm just not personally interested in hidden object games, even though they tend to be fairly stable in their quality, and there obviously is a level of fandom for it. Yeah, I think we can say no to Unstable Portal. I think we can say no to Neon Shock. I think we can say no to Junkers. Now we're starting to see a collection of really bad games, or a series of somewhat bad games. Next Savior looks weird. Motion sensor game. Wait, I guess you have to tilt your neck left or right, which almost certainly would be bad for your neck, not good. and the game itself just doesn't look that good, so I'm going to say no to that. Loco Soccer, possibly trying to create name confusion with Lego Soccer. If they come out with a game called Lego Soccer, probably isn't going to be that consistent though. Next we have a game called My Desktop Girlfriend, which says it just has candid clothes and erotic poses, even though it is tagged with not safe for work and sex and nudity. Most notably, though, while it does seem like it has a desktop girlfriend avatar function, you kind of quickly see that there's a slide puzzle option that is also part of the game, which that just seems out of place. This doesn't seem to really indicate that there's any like live 2D action. If I could play this video, maybe I could see that, where the characters would bounce about and move. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but I'm not really seeing anything that would indicate that they would say anything or do anything or change costumes every now and then. It's 79 cents, it's English only. It's obviously easily something that you can skip. Here we have a game called Hubris, which looks visually polished enough to at least get a follow. Here we have a game called Super Geisha Neon, and I guess the question is, the idea of a geisha enough of an idea to say yes to what is otherwise looking like just a platforming game? I think the answer probably is no, not for me. And frankly, making it all within a small color palette of neon colors is a little bit much. Yeah, I'm gonna say no to this. Not even gonna give it a follow. We have another visual novel match 3 dating sim game that feels like it might have had adult content in it, but seems like it may very well have censored out all the adult content in it. Let's see, because this isn't in the adult section. It's $2.54. Claims to support 14 languages in English with full audio. I guess there is an 18 plus element to it where you can patch in the adult stuff if you'd want it. So is this a game that would deserve a YouTube short? Not really. Is this a game that deserves a follow? Nah, not really. I think we can skip that. Here we have the Rumblefish 2 fighting game, which is a whole collection of characters I don't recognize. Put that on the follow list and give it a short. Zombie Cure Lab. Interesting idea, but I'm not quite sure. I mean, I guess it's kind of like a Factorio game, but instead you're curing zombies. Well, it's an interesting enough premise. Yeah, we have a game called Crimson Snow. I wonder why some of these videos play and some of these videos don't. Well, I guess if you're going to make a Christmas game, maybe a horror Christmas game really is the direction to go. There is a horror Christmas movie that, or at least a few of them actually have been made, but one I'm specifically thinking about, where you're somebody breaks into the house and kills them, I think. You have like this red-headed creepy lady. It seems like in the trailer you're just gonna get a slight jump scare. Honestly, a Christmas horror game probably sells way better than any other Christmas game that you would try to sell on Steam around the Christmas time, and I have to applaud them for actually releasing the game around Christmas time, because a lot of Christmas games come out 6 months before or after Christmas, and which I guess that'd be kind of impossible, but they don't come out anytime near Christmas. I'm going to give this one a chance, although I mostly just don't understand what this Toggez is. Togges. Yeah, we have a hidden object game. And in this case, I think I don't see enough quality that I would say yes to that. Rimward Basilisk. Says it's an anime bullet hell game. Visually, it doesn't look good enough. My Life Writing Stables 3. I think I have My Life Writing Stables 2 on my wish list. I don't know if I have a really good reason to ever cover these games, but yep, there's so few horse girl games on Steam and just little girl games in general that even if this was slightly good, and I assume this, I'm just gendering it and saying little girl games, there is definitely a possibility that there might be some little boys out there that also would like to do horse riding and have a horse and things like that. Noticeably, this game does seem like it has a lot of the activities you would do with a horse, as far as just riding and racing and jumping and carrying and maintaining him, which very often, even if you do find a horse riding game, it tends to only be a racing game or only be a caring for game, when you kind of need all of that. Let's see. So now we're at the GameDeveloper.com articles. ZeniMax Studios QA workers are going to vote on unionization. Another union is being formed, this time by QA workers at ZeniMax Studios, which certainly, like the first union, is almost certainly going to lead to another union. This will be very interesting with the 300 QA workers at Bethesda's parent company ZeniMax, which is now owned by Microsoft. It'll be very interesting to see if Microsoft tries to step in and stop them from unionizing. I suspect Microsoft will try to do some stuff, but maybe they'll say, hey, we don't need the bad press, where we're trying to require Activision Blizzard to not bother. Or maybe they'll see how the other company that fought unionization really didn't succeed that well anyways. This is still the Communication Workers of America pushing for this, and so it is a slight question whether they'd be under CWA or GWA for Game Workers of America, but it seems like Communication Workers of America are definitely trying to create more unions and maintain their relevancy, since most Communication Workers of America work in a phone company, and I imagine there's not that many phone company jobs that will be around in the next few years. Yeah, I don't know of a specific union I would pick other than CWA to push for it. Like the Screen Actors Guild probably is a better union to think about, if the Screen Actors Guild even really is a union. But Screen Actors Guild is also pretty bad as a union, so like I don't know if they would do better for their their members. Yep. So it would be interesting, certainly, to see if all of a sudden every QA division in almost every game company in the United States was unionized, and outside of the United States was unionized. If anything, this shows the power of unionization, the power that most corporations and most rich people who own the news reporting entities don't want people to know about this, as far as, like, yes, you can unionize, yes, you do have power in numbers, yes, you can improve the quality of your life by unionizing and not allowing companies to abuse you and mistreat you and underpay you and overwork you. And every time we talk about this subject, I still would say it would be nicer if everybody just had universal basic income. That would solve a lot of problems, solve a lot of crime, solve a lot of everything. Moving on, GameStop. There's a report that says GameStop has laid off staff working on its blockchain wallet. It's currently unclear what this means for the company's wider blockchain and NFT businesses. One would hope this is them getting away from NFTs and blockchains, but who knows? They really could just be laying off people for no real reason other than they're trying to save a buck on the bottom line. Part of the problem with the whole GameStop apes and just trying to prevent another company from ruining GameStop by acquiring it and then lading it with debt is, even though that effort I think was fairly amazing, and then it screwed over a large investment company that had a scheme and still probably is doing its scheme to acquire companies and then run them into the ground for profit. But the GameStop as itself is still not really a good company. It's a problem with that. And so, left to its own devices, when not being manipulated by other investing groups, GameStop still is kind of a bad company that was trying to make blockchains and NFTs, and GameStop really has never been a good company as far as its employees and as far as how it offers games to people and kids. In a lot of ways, it's exploiting ignorance of kids in the way it prices things and in the way it advertises and in the way it sells things, more than your average store. But I'll leave it at that, because I could get into a rant there. A Lord of the Rings game based on Tiger Woods tech says, apparently the Lord of the Rings game is based on Tiger Woods tech, says Glenn Schofield, which is weird. I don't know if this is a lawsuit pending. One of EA's Lord of the Rings games, according to Striking Distance Studios director Glenn Schofield, was made using the engine for a Tiger Woods title. Ahead of the release of his recently released The Callisto Protocol, Schofield answered questions on Wired about game development and his time at EA. Okay, so this is kind of like a historical mention because he was being interviewed for Callisto Protocol. Unfortunately, the problem with this is that the Callisto Protocol is a nightmare mess of bugs, so why should I listen to anything that Glenn Schofield has to say, particularly about an old Lord of the Rings game? It's very possible that the engine that made a Tiger Woods game was also diverse enough that you could make a Lord of the Rings game around it. So, like, yeah, this is one of those Wired articles where it's just a short question and answer video that they do on YouTube. Uh, Nothing. There's no real substance to any of the questions or answers there. Ubisoft has launched a tool to spread awareness of in-game behavior. Ubisoft wants players to understand the consequences of their toxic actions and foster better in-game communities. So, yeah, we have heard talk of this, the general idea of creating a shared social credit score, for lack of a better description, amongst players. As an extension of the Ubisoft Connect, the beta version of this program features learning capsules that will provide players with resources to understand the effects of their disruptive in-game behavior. Inherently, the problem with this, and the problem with talking about toxicity in games at all, is it really just feels like game companies want to become the Karens of the world, for lack of a better term. They just want to complain about things and punish people like crazy. It's possible, certainly, that Ubisoft games have not had good feedback on people who legitimately have done bad actions in games, but to advertise and promote and be prominent about they've created this whole new system and be so proud about having to create this system is kind of silly. And inherently, Ubisoft and every other game company out there is not holding themselves accountable at all to any toxicity they believe is in their games, whether it actually exists or not. Like, inherently, these companies were making games for decades, so it was these companies that allowed the gaming communities to get to the way they are now, whether they're toxic or not. It's these companies that have encouraged these behaviors in the past, or at least not punished them in the first place. So they are very late to the party as far as addressing things, and they are still blaming the external people, the individual gamers, instead of saying, hey, maybe there's something in our game that is encouraging hostility and aggression. There's another Nightbot post. Somebody must be trying to spam something like crazy. And inherently, if somebody is blocked on my chat and my YouTube page, they shouldn't be allowed to post anything in the first place. But I guess YouTube lets them do that. One thing I can say about this as a YouTuber who's gotten some comments on chat, I've never had anybody that was toxic on any of my chats. Not really. I've had people that went a little political, more political than I cared for. I've had people be silly and childish, certainly, but not really toxic. Not really saying aggressive things. Not saying they're gonna fornicate with my mother or anything like that. Just have not seen it on YouTube. So either YouTube has a good algorithm to stop that stuff, or I just haven't had that many comments on my chat really to see it. But yeah. So my experience definitely feels different as far as being online. I've pretty much not had anybody say anything really nasty. Like maybe once out of over probably 10 years of being a content creator. Maybe once somebody has said something really nasty, and that was it. Like out of, I've probably gotten at least 1,000 posts and comments across different medium. Usually people are extremely nice and extremely supportive and very generous with their speech. So yeah, I just have a different experience on the internet than it seems like so many other people seem to have. And at a certain point, if Ubisoft games are full of toxic players, maybe you just don't play online on Ubisoft games. Maybe that's the real solution. But Ubisoft would never do that. They'd never shut down all their online services and stop getting all that money. Moving on. Layoffs at CD Projekt Mobile Studios. The Witcher Monster Slayer shuts down. I guess these were the custom characters you could make for the Witcher Monster Slayer. The idea of the Witcher running around and fighting monsters is a little interesting, but it's not really what The Witcher 3 in particular was about. There wasn't really that much variety in the enemies you were fighting. You would occasionally get one troll type character in the entire game, and then you'd get maybe repetitive harpies in the ocean level, but where there might be 20 to 100 of those. But generally, you were still fighting mostly humans in The Witcher 3. Let's see. Microsoft pledges to bring Call of Duty to Nintendo platforms for the next decade. We already talked about that. Epic Games launched a combined, is that how you spell combined, or is that cabined accounts to protect young players? That may be cabined. Cabined accounts will restrict access to new downloads of games that aren't owned by the Epic until a parent gives permission. Yeah, that sounds like cabined. It's probably a bad term. Why not just call that limited accounts or controlled accounts? Let's see. Epic is introducing a new type of user account. Games that will be safe and inclusive for younger players using the Epic Games Store or Epic Games Launcher. Ideally, Steam should probably steal this idea. Inherently, you can make an account for a kid on Steam, but I don't know if you can label it as a kid's account or lock in the age gating on Steam, because Steam just asks your age all the time when you are going to a specific page. You can have shared libraries with 2 different accounts on Steam, but there doesn't really seem like there's a way where you can share only certain games under certain age ratings. Steam in general doesn't have a good integration of the age rating system. And that's all some stuff that Epic can do as a new game store, working on making a new game store, where Valve is going to have to overhaul its old game store, Steam, to add new features. So hopefully we'll see some competition there and see something like a kid's account with a better name on Steam. And then there's this report again. Sonic co-creator Yuji Naka arrested again over suspected insider trading at Square Enix. Yep, I guess he was working at Square Enix, not Sega, most recently. Alright, so here's an old game from 2021. It's rated very positively, as we'll do some follow-us cleanup here. So let's put that on the wish list. And then Alma is from 2021. Looks like it's a visual novel where you play as a nurse, healthcare worker. Yep. No relevancy, unfortunately, and honestly doesn't even look that good. Not a lot of games where you do play as a healthcare worker / nurse. Yep. If I was to try to make a catalog of every job that every main protagonist has in video games, I think we can say no to alter race. I think we'd be shocked as far as just how many games don't. This is an adult visual novel, I think. Yeah. This is the one where she acts as a mother and it becomes this let's see, it's like this wet nurse type character raises the boy and then wants to sleep. The boy wants to sleep with her um, as an adult. Yeah. Or the exact description here: a dark visual novel about a young prince's unhealthy infatuation with a nursemaid and his misguided attempts to win her heart. And yeah, I think there is probably a adult patch here. But there's a lack of relevancy here. I'll give this some more time. This is one of those cases where you have a flat 2D. I'd still call this kind of anime, even though it is natural hair color characters. Visual novel that's adult. And if there really was a bigger audience for this, you would see more reviews. It's 100% positive of the 16% of people who actually did review it. And this is still way better than like a furry game where little effort is often put into those. And yet, I guess adult games probably don't get reviews enough to be held to the same standards of having at least 30 reviews overall. And I am just going to have to decide if I could cover a game like that, and if I would cover a game like that. Almost certainly, if I was covering 2 or 3 games at the same time, I would find room to play that game and not put in the adult patch, so it'd be YouTube family friendly. But playing just one game at a time and being really slowed down as far as just how much content I'm making, it's a little risky. It's probably too risky. I guess I'm going to give this one a go. As far as putting this on the wish list, I should double check to make sure it's not in early access. A roguelike deck building tactics game that combines elements from Slay the Spire and Into the Breach. Okay. Aliens versus Ghost. It's rated very positively. Is this a VR game? No, but it is early access, so I'll give it more time. Alien Chip. I think we could probably say no to this. And Marauder. Noticeably, I think I've probably purchased all the Aliens games for, like, the Aliens movie. Real-time strategy games. I'm basically going to put a lot of real-time strategy games on the wish list and then decide whether or not I am going to actually play them. This one actually came out in November of 2021, so it's been in early access for a year. So it's pretty much just an abandoned game, I would guess. So I'm going to take it off the pot list. Alice's Warped Wonderland Recollection. I'll give it some more time. I saw an adult post of a cosplayer dressed up as American McGee's Alice, and yeah, that's a little weird considering in Alice Madness Returns they basically say she was sexually abused, and they basically point out that Alice in American McGee's Alice is underage, so that's not a character that gets cosplayed much. Although, in all fairness, Wednesday Addams is cosplayed quite a bit in adult cosplay posts, and nobody bats an eye on the fact that Wednesday Addams is always depicted as a young underage girl. Do I want to do anything with this jigsaw puzzle Alice in Wonderland game? I'm just going to kind of leave it on the fault list and think about it. I kind of like this weird art style, but I don't know if that's enough of a justification to play a jigsaw puzzle game. This is kind of the example of a game that had this come out right now, I'd probably make a YouTube short around it and then not bother to put it on the follow list. And then I think we can say no to this one also, just because the animation style isn't particularly very polished and there's just not that much relevancy to it. So get rid of that. Alright, so then let's start one of these spectate lives. We've been going 3 hours and 20 minutes so far. I'll check my Twitter feed, which I've got 14 new Twitters in 3 hours. That probably is a little bit less than normal for Wednesday at this time. Wow. Well, that was a quick YouTube spotlight. I mean, that was a quick one of those. Let's just do that again. Yeah, it might be that right now the game is glitching and thinking people are surrendering when they really aren't. Here we have Susan Wojcicki saying YouTube creators at the Streamy Awards. And so here you have 3 possibly underage streamers, none of which I recognize, showing a lot of skin in their high fashion outfits. Not a ton of skin, really, but yeah, you've got a interesting diversity here of really tight hourglass shaped shirts here, and then this lady with just a giant bow in front of her. And noticeably, they didn't even in this picture frame in their faces. So is it my fault to have a male gaze on these characters, or is it the photographer's fault? You cut this person's head off and their eye off, you cut this lady's head off, you cut this lady's head off, so you could show thighs on this character and cleavage. Like, why not bring it up and at least get the tops of the heads, if not some negative space above the tops of their heads? But yeah, there's nothing really too much to say there other than the Streaming Awards are something that YouTube is very hyped about when I don't really consider them anything at all. Marvel Snap here wants you to vote for it at the Game Awards for Best Mobile Game, which, yeah, I guess voting probably ends today at some point. The Evil Dead game developer Saber Interactive has a new chief narrative officer, Craig Sherman, which, okay. We'll have to see if that leads to anything. Insomniac Games will be streaming the Callisto Protocol, and they want everybody to know that and watch it at 12:30 p.m. today, I guess. Yeah, 12:30 p.m. Pacific time today, which may be now. They tweeted that multiple times. Insomniac Games. PC Building Simulator 2 has its first content update now available at the Epic Games Store. PC Building Simulator is PC Building Simulator 2, I do not believe, is on Steam. Apparently, Minecraft's famous end poem is now public domain, which is interesting, and the end poem for Minecraft is more cryptic and weird than I would say famous. I don't even think amongst the large percentage of Minecraft fans that most players could quote it line for line, word for word. The Square Enix Nier series has sold 8.5 million copies. Yep. I did see a Minecraft YouTuber starting a Let's Play on the new version of Minecraft, but honestly, honestly, I don't know if there's anything particularly new around this newest version of Minecraft. There obviously will be something new, but it's been a while since I've heard anything that sounded kind of amazing being added to Minecraft. That being said, they have added quite a lot of amazing stuff over time. Here we have OpenCritic, which OpenCritic, I guess, felt the need to respond here 2 days gone. Let's see, repetitive missions, a bland world and narrative, but now it's greater than 85% woke critics that made up the game's only 53% recommended. Which, yeah, this is kind of a great example of which OpenCritic shouldn't have said anything. And inherently, I can't even remember if it was OpenCritic or Metacritic that would be closer to a woke company in my mind, because I know one of them is, probably both of them. But yeah, this is literally OpenCritic getting into an argument that they did not need to be involved with. And of the listing here, PC Gamer and Eurogamer, I believe, are owned by the same company, and I would call them woke critics fairly much, because they are websites that are constantly pushing out woke articles. I don't know anything about Easy Allies. I don't know if I've actually looked at IGN enough to say anything there. Games Radar, Metro Center. Game Informer is probably fairly positive about everything, and I wouldn't really call them woke. GameSpot, on the other hand, I think probably would be in the category of woke. So, of the 10 here, I would say at least 3 of these are probably what I would call woke critics. That being said, their reviews are not particularly out of line with this. Let's see. If we look here at the actual fan base reviews, we could see if there's any comparison to make, but I don't think OpenCritic has fan reviews. So inherently, it calling itself open is just not really true, because you're not letting users review at all. There's no interest whatsoever of having user reviews on this page. So yeah, one of the things that is often, I think, accurately pointed out as far as woke people is that they insulate themselves in their in-group and don't allow for a more open bastion of free speech. Speaking of wokeness and free speech, it is also, I think, somewhat possible to, or important to point out, that as much as Elon Musk wants to be more open to allow kind of everybody on their platform, he let Kanye back on and then immediately had to suspend him again. So, like, he's not letting everyone on that, or everyone stay on for no reason. And inherently, they've run out of steam as far as writing articles to say Twitter is doomed, because Twitter has managed to stay alive for a couple of weeks, enough to say it's not going to just immediately implode. There was a lot of articles saying, well, all of the programmers have left and things are going to just start breaking. Well, I'm not seeing things breaking so much either. Not that I really want to defend Twitter or Elon Musk, but you gotta look at reality as it actually is. I'm still right now scrolling through Twitter and it's still working for the most part, and I'm not seeing people leave and go to another service, nor am I seeing another service spring up to make sense. I'm seeing some people trying to leave and go to Mastodon, but not the vast majority of people. Nicholas, the sellers of Binding of Isaac, are doing Christmas sales, so 50% off the posters. This looks like a really old picture, maybe of the creator of the Binding of Isaac when he was a kid, and that they have just 3D added the posters after the fact into this. It's a weird picture, to say the least. It's not a good way to really advertise the posters, though. And I don't think personally I would need Binding of Isaac posters on my wall. Like, I don't need to be that much of an edgelord. Ubisoft is launching a cloud beta test for the Division Resurgence in Europe on Thursday. It's released a new trailer for the open world mobile game too, according to Video Games Chronicles. Of the three sources I follow, by the way, to get most news from, Video Games Chronicles would be probably the second most woke, if we must put it on the wokeness scale, with GameDeveloper.com being the most woke. This is interesting that we have a Diablo tweet saying Lilith is coming, hashtag Lilith is coming, 12/8, 9 a.m. Pacific time. So does that mean that is the exact release date tomorrow of Diablo 4? Or does that mean there's going to be some announcement coming out tomorrow? If it comes out tomorrow at that time, then inherently it is going to be counter programming to the Game Awards. So that seems a little weird, but whatever. That probably is the last thing worth mentioning. Bandai Namco trademarks Tales of Arise Beyond the Dawn, and We Love Katamari Reroll Plus Royal Reverie in Europe. I don't know if the We Love Katamari Plus is the same as Royal Reverie, or if those are two games. Apparently, Microsoft has partnered with Calm to bring the first ever video game themed soundscapes to the platform. And then they also have an article here about their stories, about people's stories with mental health resources. Embracing the power to play is one of the many tools players can access to support their wellness. Inherently, I would say I would have been, I would be at this point a lot crazier if I couldn't play video games. I'm not going to say I'm sane now, but maybe I am, maybe I don't. I ain't. It depends on uh, who's doing the diagnosing, certainly, but I would definitely be crazier without video games as a self-soothing and self-relaxation type method. And certainly, I know I was not happier when I wasn't playing video games, or if I got my video games taken away from me. Um, let's see, a game called Quilts and Cats of Calico has been announced for PC. I kind of feel like I'd already seen this one, but maybe not. Maybe I saw a similar game. And yeah, there's still Burnhouse Lane on Steam is 10% off during its launch window, which is not really to say it's very discounted at all. But if you absolutely want to play Burnhouse Lane in probably this next 6 weeks, 10% off is the best deal you're likely to get. So I would encourage people to take it if that's their decision. Okay, well, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.